The rain came down in steady sheets, tapping against the tinted windows of the black SUV like a quiet but persistent reminder that the world outside never stopped moving, no matter how powerful a man believed himself to be. Inside, the air was still, controlled, almost sterile, just the way Don Marco Valenti preferred it. He sat in the back seat, hands folded loosely, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. To anyone who didn't know him, he might have looked calm, even relaxed, but those who understood him knew that silence around Marco was never empty. It was calculated, deliberate, and heavy with thought. The city blurred past in streaks of gray and gold. Neon lights reflected off wet pavement, bending and twisting into shapes that felt unreal. Marco had built his empire in this city. Every street, every corner, every shadow held a piece of his influence. He was a man who wore power like armor, cold, impenetrable, and polished to perfection. His decisions moved money, people, entire systems. He had turned ambition into dominance and dominance into legacy. And yet, as the SUV slowed to a stop in front of his mansion, something felt off. The gates opened silently. The vehicle glided forward. The mansion stood tall and pristine, its windows glowing softly against the dark sky. It was a monument to success, grand, flawless, admired. But tonight it felt distant, hollow. Marco stepped out, adjusting his coat as a servant rushed forward with an umbrella. He waved him off. "I don't need it." He walked through the rain. Each drop hit his shoulders, his face, his hands. He didn't flinch. He had faced worse than rain. But something about the cold water sinking into his skin grounded him in a way he couldn't explain. Inside, the warmth returned instantly. Marble floors gleamed under soft lighting. The scent of polished wood and expensive candles lingered in the air. Everything was in its place. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. He moved through the halls, footsteps echoing faintly. Staff members nodded respectfully as he passed, their presence quiet, almost invisible. That was how he preferred it, efficiency without intrusion. He entered his office, a room lined with dark mahogany and filled with objects that represented decades of success, awards, contracts, photographs of deals that changed his life. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the light as it swirled in the glass, and then, the word cut through the silence like a crack in glass. Marco turned. Sophia stood in the doorway. She was small for her age, but there was something in her posture that felt older, something steady, something unshaken. Her dark eyes met his, not with fear, but with something far more unsettling. Certainty. In her hand she held a photograph. It was worn, edges curled, colors faded. Marco recognized it immediately. Isabella. For a moment the room seemed to shrink. Sophia stepped forward slowly. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. Every movement was deliberate, as if she had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times. "I found this," she said softly. Marco swallowed. "You should be asleep." She ignored the instruction. Her fingers tightened slightly around the photograph. Then she spoke again. "You left Mom hungry, Daddy." The words were quiet. No anger, no accusation in tone, just truth, and somehow that made them unbearable. Marco felt something shift inside him, something unfamiliar, something raw. He had been challenged before, threatened, even betrayed. But nothing had ever pierced him like this. He opened his mouth to respond, to correct, to explain, but nothing came out, because a part of him knew that whatever she meant, it wasn't something he could dismiss. Sophia didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked away, her footsteps soft against the floor. And just like that, the silence returned. But it was no longer controlled. It pressed against him, heavy and suffocating. For the first time in years, Marco Valenti didn't feel powerful. He felt uncertain. The next morning came with a brightness that felt almost inappropriate. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating every polished surface in the mansion. It was the kind of morning that suggested clarity, renewal, possibility. Marco felt none of it. He stood in his office, staring at the city below. Sophia's words replayed in his mind over and over again. "You left Mom hungry." He had given Isabella everything, the best doctors, the finest home, security, comfort, luxury beyond imagination, hadn't he? His jaw tightened. Then why did the words feel true? He turned away from the window and stepped into the hallway. The staff moved around him as they always did, efficient, silent, precise. But now, instead of seeing a system, he saw people. A maid adjusting a vase with careful hands, a cook wiping down a counter, eyes tired but focused. a guard standing at attention, shoulders tense, invisible, all of them. Just like Sofia had made him feel. His gaze lingered on one figure in particular. Elena. She moved quietly, almost blending into the background. Her steps were light, her posture slightly hunched as if she had trained herself to take up as little space as possible. Marco had seen her 100 times, but he had never noticed her. Now, he did. There was something about the way she worked, careful, deliberate, not rushed, not lazy. Just intentional. Later that day, Marco found himself watching the security monitors in his office. It was something he often did, but usually for different reasons: efficiency, control, oversight. Today, it was curiosity. He watched as dinner was served in the grand dining room. Plates filled with expensive food, portions large enough to feed twice the number of people present. And then he saw Elena again. She moved through the room after everyone had finished clearing plates, but instead of discarding the leftovers, she paused, looked around, and carefully began placing the remaining food into small containers. Her hands trembled slightly, not with greed. Marco's eyes narrowed. His old instincts surfaced immediately. Theft, of course. He leaned back, mind already forming conclusions. He had built his empire on identifying patterns, spotting weaknesses, eliminating inefficiencies. And this was a weakness, but something stopped him. Sofia's voice echoed again. "You left Mom hungry." Marco exhaled slowly. Follow her," he muttered to himself. That night he did something he hadn't done in years. He followed someone personally. The SUV stayed back, headlights dimmed as Elena walked through the street. The weather had turned colder again, wind biting through the air. She wrapped her thin coat tighter around herself, clutching the bag of food. She walked 3 blocks. 4, 5, the streets changed, from polished to worn, from bright to dim, from safe to uncertain. Finally, she stopped in front of a building that looked like it had been forgotten. Marco stepped out, keeping his distance. He watched as she entered. Then after a moment, he followed. The inside was worse. Dim lights flickered overhead. The walls were cracked, the air was cold. He climbed the stairs quietly, and then he saw it. A small room, a door slightly open, and inside, 3 children. Their faces lit up the moment Elena walked in. Food, one of them whispered, eyes wide. Elena smiled. It was the first time Marco had seen her smile. She sat on the floor, opening the containers, distributing the food carefully, making sure each child got enough. They ate quickly, hungrily. But there was laughter too, soft, real, alive. Marco stood frozen. This wasn't theft. This was something else. He stepped forward. The door creaked. Elena looked up, and everything changed. Her face went pale. "You, I can explain," she stammered, standing quickly. Marco didn't speak immediately. He stepped into the room, his presence filling the space. The children fell silent. Fear replaced their joy. Marco looked around. At the cracked walls, the thin blankets, the empty shelves. Then back at Elena. "I misjudged you," he said finally. His voice was different. Not sharp, not cold, just human. Elena blinked, confused. And then, as if something inside her shifted, she reached for a small blue binder on the table. Marco's breath caught. He recognized it instantly. Isabella's. Elena held it carefully, like it was something sacred. She wasn't hungry for food," Elena said softly. Marco's chest tightened. "You was hungry for people." The words hit harder than Sofia's. Elena continued, her voice steady despite everything. "I visited her. Every week, sometimes every day." Marco's mind raced. He had been busy. Deals, meetings, expansion. "She read to her," Elena said. Poetry, letters, anything to keep her present." Marco felt something break. "She told me once that money can buy almost anything, but it can't buy connection." Tears filled Elena's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "She asked me to look after Sofia." Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Marco looked at the children again, at the life happening in a place he would have once ignored completely, and for the first time in years, he felt ashamed. Days turned into weeks, and Marco changed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. He started small. He spoke to Sofia more, not out of obligation, but respect. And then he did something unexpected. He created the Isabella Foundation. Not as a gesture, but as a mission. Elena led it. And under her guidance, it grew into something powerful. Food was redirected. People were noticed. Loves were changed. The mansion changed too. It became alive. Not just filled, but lived in. And one evening as Marco sat with Sofia listening to her talk about her day, he realized something. He hadn't just rebuilt his world, he had finally understood it. Sometimes, the people who seem to have everything are the ones missing the most important things. And sometimes, the ones with nothing, are the ones who give the most. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness still exists even in the darkest places, take a moment to like and share it with someone who needs hope today. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen a quiet act of kindness that changed someone's life? And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this prove that no matter how cold the world feels, humanity is never truly gone.